Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for attending the 2022 Smart Start Conference. While we weren't able to host the Smart Start Conference in person this year, we're very thankful to have you virtually. It's great to have all of you with us. Before the session begins, we ask that you just mute your microphones to ensure the workshop speaker is easily heard. So thank you for doing so. I would like to give a warm welcome to Rebecca Armstrong for her session using culturally responsive children books to support family engagement. As a reminder, there is a survey for this session. It will be a survey for the whole day, so I will send that out now, but please consider taking it at the end of the day when all sessions for the day that you would like to attend have been attended. So that will be sent out, and I also have a link that I can fill out with and a raffle that I will be giving out at the end of this session. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Rebecca, for presenting. I look forward to your session.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica, for having me today. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Rebecca Crystal Armstrong from the Raising a Reader National Office. And this morning, we're discussing using culturally responsive children's books to support family engagement. I look forward to this session, and I look forward to everyone's presentation. We have a lot of folks registered, so the more you can put your responses in the chat, the more you fill out the polls. We'll have a Jamboard session, a couple Jamboards, and even a breakout. I would just love everyone's feedback and input into the session so that we can make it really great. All right. So like I said, my name is Rebecca Crystal Armstrong. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Programs at the Raising a Reader National Office. I've been here with Raising a Reader for, I'm going on year 12. And before Raising a Reader, well, at Raising a Reader, I oversee all of our programmatic operations. So our affiliate network of about 300 partners across the country, helping them with technical assistance and developing a strategy for them. I also lead the curation of our children's book collection that we'll talk about toward the end of today's presentation. But that book collection contains over 3,000 titles of children's books in over 13 different languages and represents all of the children that we serve at Raising a Reader. So as you're coming in, feel free to put in the chat who you are. I see lots of folks new and lots of folks that I already know, so welcome everyone. All right. So let's talk about what we're going to do this morning. So really the goal is for everyone to continue in our development of understanding of using culturally responsive children's books as a tool to increase meaningful family engagement. This is our welcome and introductory start. We'll talk about just some general practices. We're not going to go as deep in the practices. Instead, we're going to go deeper in the tools and really how do you select books that are representative of the families that you serve, how to evaluate children's books, and how to access resources so that you are cultivating and curating a meaningful book collection for your family engagement endeavors. We'll also, at the very end, take a very quick case study of Raising a Reader and how we use children's books for our family engagement program. So welcome to everyone just coming in. Please continue to use the chat and let everyone know you're here. Okay, so let's think about it. We are actually going to start out from the get-go using our Jamboard. So I am going to ask Ashley or Jessica to put our Jamboard link in the chat. So we're going to use a Jamboard and we're going to think about a couple of different things. And a Jamboard, I will show you how to use it in just a moment, but a Jamboard is in the chat box. We're going to put a link to the Jamboard and you are going to get to use a sticky note and kind of respond to some of the questions I'm asking. So the first thing I want us to think about is our icebreaker, virtual icebreaker is, what is family engagement to you? what do you think it means to be culturally responsive? And the third let's think about it question is, what does the phrase culturally responsive family engagement mean to you? So these are 3 different questions. And what we are going to do is go on to this Jamboard. So like I said, looks like Jessica has put in the chat box, the Jamboard link. I'm going to pause my share and show you how to do this. And I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, all right. So here's our Jamboard. And you're going to get to a screen like this when you click on the link to the Jamboard. And right here on the left, you'll see it says sticky note.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca. I just wanted to let you know that it says viewer access for on our end. So we're not able to edit or put stickies. So you may need to change that setting.
Oh, okay. Anyone, let's copy that link. Okay, now I'm going to copy it and I'm going to put it in the chat. I'm going to put the real link in the chat. Let's try that one.
I think you should change it to anyone on the internet with this link can edit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that should work now. Anyone on this link can view. Editor. Okay, now let's copy the link. Nothing like a little bit of technical need. Okay, let's see if that link works. If not, we can just put it in the chat. We don't have to do a Jamboard. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to do it one more time, copy the link, and I'm going to put it in the chat.
And then Rebecca will try that. And then also, I think we can change the URL to edit. I'll see if we need to do that. And I can do that for, oh, there you go.
Looks like we're able to do that. So the first Jamboard is what is family engagement? And you can go on at your own leisure and go to the second Jamboard of what do you think it means to be culturally responsive? And then the third. I just put them each on their own. So feel free. I've got several folks going in there putting your sticky notes in. Thank you for your patience as I edited that. Great.
I'll put down, okay.
Awesome. Okay, we've got some great answers here. Okay, so the first Jamboard is what is family engagement to you? The second Jamboard is what do you think it means to be culturally responsive? And the third Jamboard is what does culturally responsive family engagement mean to you? Okay. These are some great answers.
Good morning, Rebecca. Can you hear me?
I can. Good morning.
Good morning. You probably look at the bottom of the screen because I couldn't get my Max to join hands with this conference. So you see my husband name Tyus View, but I am Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
And, hi, and I'm on the Smart Store board, and I felt out of place yesterday. I felt like I was out of place. So what I'm actually doing is listening in.
Okay.
To a lot of things that's going on. I'm not a teacher. I'm retired, and I am a board member.
Oh,
so
welcome.
Thank you. If you don't hear me saying anything, I'm just really listening in.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, awesome. So some of us are still in the view and some of us are not. You know, Jamboard can be a little wonky sometimes. So we're just going to go ahead and stop where you are. We will look at what is family engagement and some of these great answers, and then we can go and just answer in the chat box. So that's okay. So as we look at what is family engagement here, a couple of things, building meaningful relationships with families. I'm sorry if you're not able to add a note, feel free to put it in the chat and we can look at the chat. Family spending quality time together. Thanks, Ashia, I believe. Awesome, thank you. Thank you, Carol. Family involvement, doing activities together. Let's see, I gotta move move you all. Families who are clients are included at all levels of your organization and decisions, allowing parents to engage and make decisions with the facility. Great. Okay. These are some great definitions. You can add your answers to the chat if you were unable to add it to the Jamboard. Okay, great. And so that's the first one. I think we've got some great definitions of family engagement, including those families in all decision aspects of your organization, valuing members of the family and their input in a situation. So cultural responsivity, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for us. Well, maybe not that big. How about 50%? Okay, great. Respecting others' differences, diversity, intentional respect, inclusive of all cultures. So this is great. Understanding who I am, my beliefs and my own culture, as well as being aware of others, their beliefs and cultures, being respectful of both and all cultures throughout teaching and my life. Wonderful. Being intentional. Great. These are some answers I was hoping to get. Being intentional about learning what a family's culture is within their home, their cultural background, and within the community. Continually learning about other cultures while reaching out and welcoming. Being respectful of others' beliefs. Honoring a family's wishes and cultures. Absolutely. Respecting differences. Wonderful. Okay. Great. And finally, what does the phrase culturally responsive family engagement mean to you? And I think these are great. Collaborating together, meeting people where they are, doing what you can to help others as best that you can. Families feel seen in the family engagement practices. Creating trust. Intentionally providing opportunities for family members to share in their children's educational process, whatever level they are able to. Great. Awesome. Involving families and practices and honoring their differences. Perfect. Great. These are all wonderful responses and responses that I was really hoping to get. It's, you know, depending on where you are, you want to see where people are in their journey with family engagement, with cultural responsivity. And I really loved everyone's answers and input. You can feel free to put it in the chat. You can even put your hand up so that we can unmute. There's so many of us, it might not be good to just unmute, but there is a hand icon if you would like, or put in the chat that you want to say something. But one of the utmost importances is understanding yourself and understanding that this is a journey that doesn't end. No one is at the end of their journey to, you know, to finding out, to knowing everything there is to know about cultural responsivity and family engagement. So if you have more to offer to this session, I would welcome you to put it in the chat or ask to, there is some emoticons to do a hand raise or say in the chat, hey, Rebecca, I have something to say, because none of us knows everything. So I would love your input as we go along. Great. So thank you for that. It's just a little bit of a warm up as we start talking about cultural responsivity and family engagement and the tools that Raising a Reader uses to engage our families. So as we think about, you know, I do get the question sometimes, well, Rebecca, why do we need to talk about cultural responsivity? Everyone knows it's a thing. Everyone knows that, you know, we need to be culturally responsive. And my answer tends to go back to this. These are some demographics from the United States, the last US Census. And I always emphasize the importance of this topic because we have an ever-changing society, and we have to know that this is where society is, and this is where our practices need to be ahead of where we are as a society. So I won't read all of these to you, but we know that in school year 2021, over half of students enrolled in public schools have identified as people of color. More than 1 out of every 5 people over the age of 5 speaks a language other than English at home. And in 2016, over 50% of all babies were racial or ethnic, what is considered minorities from the US Census. And of course, educators From who I speak to on a daily basis, educators are facing classes of students who speak a dozen or more languages and or dialects. I was talking to Oklahoma City schools just last week, and they said we have over 90 languages that we know of that are spoken. What can we do? How can we be responsive to those? So we have this ever-changing population in the United States of America, and just to know where we are as a country and that we have to be as prepared as possible to meet the needs of all of these families, all of these language, all of these cultures. So that's where we are. So we created our own definition of family engagement, and I picked up some language from NAFSCI in that, it is the shared responsibility. It's not just, the school or the community agency or the educator. It's a shared responsibility where community agencies and organizations are committed to reaching out to engage families in meaningful ways, and families are committed to actively supporting their children's learning and development. Oftentimes the first, engagement starts with that educational setting, that organization or school, but it is this shared responsibility. We are all in this together and leveraging one another's expertise. The families are the biggest experts on their children. The educational setting might be the biggest experts on something else, and you come together for the best development of that child. It is continuous across a child's life. It doesn't end in early childhood. I'm not sure about you, but when I was a teacher, the younger my kiddos were that I was teaching, the more engaged the families were, and it kind of petered out as they went along. But this is a continuous process through college or through the child's highest educational grade. An effective family engagement cuts across and reinforces learning in multiple settings where children are learning. They're at home, their pre-K programs, their school, their after-school programs, their faith-based organizations and institutions, could be their community, their Little League program, or their Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or whatever they are. This is about everyone doing this together within the community. We also know decades and decades of research have told us that meaningful family engagement enhances child success. And in fact, Harvard Family Research Project put together a compilation of research, and it talked about the three kind of main components of family engagement. And number one was a family's responsibility for learning at home. And that is those families, helping support their kiddos with reading before, reading routines, homework routines, and overall learning. The second component was the schools, and schools reaching out to the family. Schools or educational settings reaching out to the family. And then the third was the community and communication. And when we have families that are taking place and taking active roles in their child's learning, and schools and the community coming together, we're seeing our children's outcomes. The trajectory of children's outcomes are so much higher than for those children who don't have one of those three components. We're seeing social emotional development, communication amongst each other and their peers, communication amongst adults, higher academics, more positive academic success, reading by third grade, and so on. But we also have, the caregivers know. We know that caregivers know their children, and no matter where the caregiver and parent is in his or her, their life, they want the best for their children, and they know they're in the best position to discuss their child's needs. Success of our country depends on the success of our children, and the success of our children often also is dependent on the success of our families and success of that cross communication and that family engagement. And every child needs to have the opportunity for a quality education and be better prepared for life. We're talking a little more about family engagement here. Sorry, I'm moving you guys on the screen. I'm gonna just move you over here. Great. So that's our definition of family engagement. And now we're just kind of moving on to cultural sensitivity. And that is just really exactly what you guys said, exactly what you said on the Jam boards. And thank you for doing that, by the way, is that cultural sensitivity is really being aware that cultural differences and similarities exist and have an effect on overall our values, our learning, and our behavior. It's this awareness. Doesn't mean you have to be fluent and you have to know everything, but just an awareness that these differences exist and being open to learning and to listening and stepping back and hearing. Okay. And so what does it mean to be culturally responsive? This is just a compilation. I'm sure if you have more to add to this, let's put it in the chat. But this is a way of being, as I've kind of said a few times. It's a mindset that affirms your own culture. It's okay to affirm your own culture and be knowledgeable and proud of your own culture, but you're positively engaging with cultures that are different from your own, taking into consideration the differences between cultures and viewing diversity as a benefit, not something that you have to tolerate, not something that we have to get through, but is a benefit, and you're interacting knowledgeably and respectfully. Even if you don't have that knowledge, you're interacting respectfully with any cultural group. And then that lens through which we make sense of our world and our lived experiences. So those are 3 different definitions of cultural responsiveness. And please, if you have additional thoughts, please go ahead and put them in the chat. I will keep my chat box up so I can see if anyone adds anything there to what cultural responsiveness is. But as culturally responsive educators, we are all educators. We're leaders, participants in early childhood development in some way, shape, or form. Anyone who is attending this session is. So as these educators, as these leaders in early childhood, we have to intentionally consider socio-political issues that affect students and their families throughout the stages of their lives. It's not just something that's going to affect them while they're in our care. This could be something that, and this could be anything. This could be, you know, taking into account my children and their reluctance to go to healthcare providers and understanding what that socio-political climate might be, or understanding why there could be redlining and they don't have access to the internet like I have access to in my suburban home. So these are just 2 simple examples of considering the socio-political issues. We also, as educators and early childhood leaders, have to commit to initiating transformative change in practice and decision-making with the intent of improving educational and life experiences of all children and families. So we are understanding that these differences exist, ever seeking to be information seekers. Sometimes we have to step back and we have to listen and we have to learn, but sometimes we have to step up and advocate and do the work. So it's not just doing one or the other. It's, you know, when you're stepping back and you're learning, you're not always back and learning. Sometimes you're taking those learnings and stepping up and being advocates. I'm going to go to the chat because a few different things have been added. Thank you, Legentry. Being culturally responsive is a practice, absolutely. A step further than simply acknowledging the culture and cultural diversity or even tolerating it. Exactly. Thank you for saying that. Iris, we have the responsibility to treat someone like they want to be treated. Great, thank you, Iris. Okay, great. So it is that knowledge, awareness, but the practice. Okay, great. Oh. Okay. So these are also things we know about family engagement and early childhood, that there are a lot of barriers to engagement. So not only do we need to acknowledge that families do know the most about their children, they're the best advocates and most important advocates for their children, but they can face barriers to engagement. And sometimes those barriers can be, gosh, anything. I mean, there's so many different barriers. There's single parents like me, they're working multiple jobs. They are, you know, they might not understand the education system. Could be a cultural barrier where, you know, they feel like, hey, I'm raising my children to be healthy, but you know what, you kind of are the educators. You take care of that. I'm going to take care of this respectfully. They might not feel like they have a voice. Hundreds and thousands of different barriers that they could have to the engagement. And also family involvement can extend those experiences. We said this earlier, but a parent who understands what their child is working on has a better sense of their child's competency. So this is some other reasons why it is so important for us as the leaders in early childhood education to be that first branch that reaches out. Because as I said, with the Harvard Family Research Project information, that yeah, one of the responsibilities is the family, the parent, the caregiver having knowledge of their child and doing those learning a responsibility for learning at home. But it's our job as the early childhood education community to reach out to those families and to make sure that they know that they are their child's first and most important teacher, and they have everything it takes to help their child to learn. We want them to know that we can help overcome the barriers to engagement, whether that is they need the materials written in a different language, they need the times that you're going to communicate with them be more convenient for them during their break or before, after work. And we also want to help make sure that they understand what's going on in their child's environment. One of the studies Raising Reader participated in last summer was with the New America Foundation, and we did focus groups all across the country. And one of the biggest things that came out of COVID was that families, for sometimes the first time, really understood what their child was working on in school and really had an understanding and a better just kind of appreciation for what their kiddos were learning. They felt involved, and they felt like they had what it took to really help their families. And those who didn't, we were going above and beyond as an early childhood education, maybe not above and beyond, but we were meeting families and really trying to help them understand what their kiddos were learning, because families were a new partner, a different type of partner with the child's education. Overall, bringing all of this together before we go on to our next topic is that, this responsive family, school, and community engagement is really supporting the caregiver-child bond. That is one of the most powerful bonds that we will realize is between a caregiver and a child, helping empower those families as a child's first teacher. Using culture as an asset, it is such an asset, and really leveraging those assets. If families are willing and able to leverage their assets and their knowledge to you, that's very powerful. Building trust by sharing knowledge and decision-making power between the families and educational professionals, and meeting families wherever they are. So as we also think about culturally responsive family, school, and community engagement, we think about those key practices. Be present and build relationships. One thing I always say is, reaching out to families as much as possible, and not just when it's something not great, being there, being present, and making sure that your families know that you are there for them. I often start my program year when I was teaching in Baltimore City Public Schools is, kids and families got a letter from me over the summer telling them I was so excited in their home language, telling them I was really excited to be their teacher. Families heard from me during the good, during the not so good, and during the times when a kiddo needed something. So being present, being that present educator, making sure families have access to you, honoring and promoting existing knowledge. There's a lot that, we think we know going in as educators, but a lot that the families bring that we don't know. Knowing what works for every family. I know some families are better in person in front of me. Some families are best, they can respond best to me in text. Other families, it might be a video call or a phone call, but something is going to work differently for every family. And some families are comfortable with the educational setting, but honestly, some families are not, because their experiences haven't been positive. And so even coming to the school building could be a barrier for them, could bring up past trauma, past negative experiences. So identify what works for each family, and you can be frank and ask them, what's going to work for you? Here are some of the different ways that we can communicate what's going to work for you. Promoting that culture of awareness, learning, and sharing. And this doesn't have to be very big. This can just be, having your circle time and asking children how they celebrate their, birthdays, or, how they celebrate summer, or what they're doing this spring. And you're going to learn a lot. And that simple act is sharing of cultures, sharing of, our community. Then you can go from there and build out from there and ask families to come in and share, or come in and be that reader, or come in and be present. Foster community by building social capital. So really, helping those families understand that all of their input is so important and critical to the development of the kid, the child, to the development of the class, and development of the class or program culture. Okay. So we already really talked about this, right? We talked about this on the Jamboard. These are just different ways you can personally work on being culturally responsive. And I would love to, if you have more to add to this list, please put it in the chat. But we talked about developing your own cultural self-awareness, appreciating the value of diverse views, building on kiddos' strengths, examining your own teaching practices for cultural bias. And sometimes you might need someone to help you with that, but really taking a look at, gosh, what am I saying? What am I teaching? And, we all are going to have biases, and to think that we don't is just kind of omission there. So trying to be aware of those biases and learning what you can. And again, it is not stepping back, but it is a practice, and it is a constant journey. So I'm just going to go to the chat and just read a couple of things as we go on. I'm actually going to go up here. Great. A couple of practices. Linda put that her program sends home notes documenting the kids' day, what they're working on, detailed frequent parent-teacher conference that discuss the strengths. That's great. Kyler says being present and building relationships go a long way. I sometimes get discouraged that my outreach efforts go unnoticed, but as I was reminded yesterday that even though parents may not always be very responsive, they are still noticing and appreciative of the efforts. Absolutely, Kyler. I can't tell you how many parent-teacher conference nights I had no families whatsoever. But then even sometimes days, weeks, or even years later, I see a family in the community and they mention like, oh, Miss Crystal, you always did this, or you were always there, or I always knew that I could just walk up to the school and talk to you before school. So even if you think it goes unnoticed, sometimes it is that one family that helps you realize that. Great. Some more in the chat. Legentry, thank you so much for your participation. Learning the individual child and family values. Culture is a part of them and a substantial one. The children need authentic experiences and authentic representation. Absolutely. Great. Any others? Any other work that we need to do? This is just the tip of the iceberg on the list, but if I were to summarize it, I might start with a few of these points. Okay, great. Let's keep going. Okay, so we are going to break out into a session. A few people shared in the chat. These are 4 questions that we're going to look at, and I'm going to copy and I'm going to put these in the chat. What strategies have you practiced to create meaningful family engagement experiences or culturally responsive family engagement experiences? Any tools you use to support that family engagement? So these can be, like you said, the one-pagers of your day in your home language. And the third question is really, what have you done to support your personal growth in awareness or action? So a few of these questions can kind of be lumped together, but I'm really interested in learning the strategies you've used that are culturally responsive, any tools, so strategies and tools, and then where are you or how are you, what are you doing to support your personal growth? Okay, the questions are in the chat box. So we're going to go into a breakout room, and I believe Jessica and Ashley are helping me break you all out into groups. And I'm probably going to set a timer. I'm thinking a timer for about 10 minutes or so to get into your groups, probably groups of less than 10. And for you all to share this and then come back to the bigger group. There are over 130 of us here, and I would love for us to be able to do some peer learning and leverage our expertise with one another. Okay, so I'm going to ask Jessica if we're good for breakout groups or if I should. Okay, great. All right, so your breakout group has opened up, so you should get a pop-up and it should say join, and just click on that blue join, and you're going to join your group for about 10 minutes. I'll set the timer where we're going to discuss these questions. Hey, welcome back. Thank you for going into the breakout rooms. Everyone's slowly coming back into the main room.
This meeting is
Okay, looks like we're all just about back into the rooms. I would love to know if anyone has a response. So there's a couple of ways we can do this with such a big group. In your toolbar where it has like mute, stop video, there is a little 3 dots that say more. And when you click on that, there are reactions. And one of the reactions is a hand clap, a thumbs up, but you can also have a reaction to raise your hand, and it will, your hand can go up and I can respond to you that way, or you can just put yourself in the chat and say, hey, I want to, just acknowledge that you want to participate. So what strategies have you, culturally relevant strategies, responsive, have you practiced to create meaningful family engagement experiences? I would love to know. Again, you can put your answer in the chat, you can put your response, you can raise your hand. What have you done to support meaningful, culturally relevant family engagements? I'm going through just to make sure. Okay, Allison, great, thank you. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know what your group talked about.
A big part of the conversation that our group had was just about the importance of having conversation with families. We asked them to fill out paperwork and things like that, and we capture some information, not everything, but more or less just letting the family conversation that we have with the family be a guiding piece of huge information and value to ensuring that, we're being meaningful and that we're being respectful and sensitive to their culture and things like that, and just valuing those differences and making them part of whatever is going on and not feel excluded but valued.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you for your participation. Tamika, welcome.
Hi, so I work with a program called Healthy Start, and we do home visits. And so I think our program is intentional of having cultural, just awareness and diversity and responsivity. I can't say that one. By having a curriculum that kind of, has fewer words than the larger curriculum, with more pictures. We use interpreting services. And then on a personal level, I like to bring in activities for the children that represents their culture. And so some of my parents teach their children how to write Arabic letters. And so I'll find something where they can practice their Arabic letters, but also, to, and invite them for school readiness, to match the alphabets that we use. But, just trying to also just make them feel engaged.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Tamika. I love that. Jolandra, am I saying that right?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
It's okay, Rebecca. You can call me Jay, but it's Jolandra.
Jolandra,
good morning, everyone. So we are in the 21st century. So the thing is, since we've been called and we are in the 21st century, COVID-19 has shown us, how to communicate and bond and bridge the gap, in various places all across the world. And so with that being said, one of the ways that we promote culturally responsive family engagement is through Zoom, is by, zooming in with families from Mexico, or having them zoom in on different skills that they may have, construction, sewing, anything like that that pertains to the curriculum or the study that students are learning. So that's one of the ways that we kind of bridge the gap with that, but also too, giving more literacy in terms of allowing children to see themselves in diverse books. We all know that research-wise that, children back in the day, that it's more animals and, people of the Caucasian descent were, in books more so versus any diversified book. So, you know, we're just trying to change the game on that and provide them with the opportunity and the resources to actually give them the sliding glass doors and the mirrors to see themselves in the literacy piece. Will open up the world of culture responsiveness and family engagement.
Great, thank you, Jilandra. I appreciate it. Janelle, and then I'm going to ask Michelle and Jessica, and then we're gonna get into the nitty gritty. We're gonna get into the book. So Janelle, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, so I can actually piggyback off of what Jilandra was saying. So I do Reach Out and Read, as well as DPIL and Storywalk. And one of the things I know in our breakout groups, I mentioned about including cultural and just inclusion in my Storywalk selections. So just kind of like engaging the community in that way, learning about different cultures and different learning abilities and all that. But just to go back from what Jilandra was saying, there was one time when a parent called me and was complaining that their white son received the book Hair Love. And so she was very upset. So I had to really be careful about how I responded to her. But I ended up doing just kind of a generic, a little book reading on Instagram about the book Hair Love, and just talked about how important it is to have representation in children's literature, as well as to use children's books as a way to expose children to other cultures. So I think that is definitely something that you can kind of use. Books are something you can use as a tool to discuss being culturally responsive that way.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that you said that. And it's oftentimes the grown-ups are the ones with the problem for the book. The children are often open to reading that. You know, I had a parent who's a friend. You know, I have a lot of Baltimore City School teacher friends, and she said, like, Rebecca, my son, he's not into those books that are in the red book bag that y'all sent home. And I said, well, just try it. Just try it out. Let him choose. Go from there. If you read a couple pages and not into it, it's no big deal. She got back to me a week later and she said, we would have never read those books before, ever. We would have never gone to the library and picked them out, but they came to us and I opened myself up to reading them, and my son loved them. So it's oftentimes us having bringing those, you know, grown-ups bringing those biases there. So I appreciate you saying that. Linda, did you want to unmute?
Hey, I actually just wanted to say one quick thing. I am completely opposite of what the parent was upset about. I have two multiracial children, beautiful. Their cultures of their father is African American as well as Puerto Rican, and I come from a long line of Scottish and German Caucasian. And when my little Sandy Lynn, who is 3 years old and her hair goes down to her buttocks, she said, that looks like me. That's hair like me. So I just wanted to say to everybody at the conference through children's books, I had forgotten all about that book. But then when the other lady brought it up, I'm like, we're on the opposite side of the spectrum. I just wanted to tell you that little bit of tidbit.
I love that. I love that. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So that was a perfect segue into that. Jessica, I wanted to open it up to you real quick to see if anyone's saying anything to piggyback on in the chat before we actually get into the nitty gritty of books.
Yeah, so I've had some direct chat messages, and so I'll just read off a few to you. One message is, it's important, as you said, to promote acceptance of different culture. not just merely tolerate other cultures or any other difference for that matter. I also received build trust so we can talk the hard questions, let the families know I am not the expert in their family and want to learn from them. And then I also received reflect with the family on their beliefs and values. And another message from a technical assistance standpoint, I try to encourage and give resources to early educators about including culturally sensitive activity planning in their daily routines.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Okay. Okay, so we're going to move on a little bit. You know, I think we have the family engagement part down, and now we're going to talk about some tools to support culturally responsive family engagement and then how to build your collections. All right, great. So why children's books? You know, there are so many different tools. We talked about, you know, having your, you know, collateral in different languages. And this is my personal response. This isn't what you kind of Google told me or what I looked up from any experts. This is Rebecca Crystal Armstrong's response is that, you know, books support strong family bonding and responsivity through engaging developmentally appropriate books. And of course, we know that when families are sharing books, that's supporting healthy brain development, language and literacy development, intrinsic reading motivation. When children have the experience of a book bonding with a family member, with a caregiver or provider, they're associating sharing books with a positive experience. And that is so needed when they go into school, that they have those associations, those positive associations between books and success. The content can include anything. I mean, the sky's the limit as far as content with children's books, but when families are seeing themselves, when children see themselves, just as we just heard, when children see themselves in a book, hey, that looks like me, that looks like my cousin. I took the book when I started Raising a Reader in Baltimore City, and I took the program in, and I passed the books out, and one of the girls said it was the book Shades of Black, and she said, this looks like me. She'd only seen really, you know, I love characters like Doc McStuffins and those, but it was true pictures and illustrations that are realistic that this child bonded with. And she went through and told me every person that she knew that looked like someone in that book. It is affirming to you and your family when you see yourselves in the pictures of a book, you see your culture, you see your language. We want families to feel valued and heard. And then also when you combine children's books, when you combine books and tools and activities with the information on why it's so important, not you should be doing this, but this is what sharing books with your child helps to do to their brains, to their language and literacy development, and you have everything it takes. Mom, dad, abuela, auntie, whomever it is. It helps lay the foundation for homework habits. It helps lay the foundation for responsibility for learning at home and connecting families with the educational setting. So children's books can be that catalyst, can be that tool that you use to support your family engagement, just by the simple act of having those titles in your classroom, sending them home, or using them during your conferences or your events. So as we get into children's books and the diversity of children's books, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about kind of the elephant in the room, and that, you know, we're getting better in the publishing industry. They're getting better at producing books that are representative of the children that are in the United States. But if I'm looking at the census, almost 58% of children in the US or families are white, identify as white. 18 almost 19% is Hispanic, 12.4% is African American, Black, 6% as Asian, 2.9% is biracial or multiple, and 0.2% is Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander. This is just exactly what I copied and pasted from the US Census. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but can I just make a point that 6 years ago, it was 98% white. So it's a good thing that it is more diversity, but yep. We're still having this conversation, which is so unfortunate.
It is absolutely, Mary Lee. So you can look, so this graphic here was done by University of Wisconsin in 2018. So what Mary Lee is saying is you can Google 2012, I think it's 2012 or 2010, and this looks very, very different. So we are making progress maybe not quite enough and not at the acceleration we need. But so in 2018, 50% of children's books were, had white characters, 27% animals and other, 10% African American, 7% Asian Pacific Islander. If we look here, 5% Latinx. So there you can see the discrepancies. There are a lot of, and this is just the books published in that particular year. 5% Latinx, and our Hispanic population is almost 19%. 1% American Indian and First Nations. Again, this isn't showing every racial demographic here, but these are kind of the top, because we're not going to get into 0.2% this and 0.2% that. We have a lot of work to do, even though this is such a drastic improvement over the past years. There's still a lot of room to grow here. Okay. So we already talked about this. Why build those culturally diverse book collections? It is about the windows, the mirrors, and the sliding glass door. It is that, conveying that your families are important, that your programs are for them, that it's about them, and that you value what they bring to the table. So what is this culturally diverse library? What does it include? And again, we are all still on our journeys. So if I didn't include anything, please put it in the chat. Please, raise your hand or unmute yourself and let me know. Again, this isn't the comprehensive list. This is the list that can fit on the slide. So we want text that engage children no matter what, the varying demographics and social identity markers, books that call out misrepresentations or stereotypes, a variety of genre and format. We want as many authors and illustrators with lived experiences as possible, to lift up those authors who are not, your Caucasian females necessarily, or males who actually, write most of the children's books that we see. Opportunities for both local and global learning. We want children to see themselves, their communities, their families, but also have the opportunity to learn about others. And a range of experiences within a group or culture. So not every Asian Pacific Islander family is going to experience and be like this. Not every differently abled child is going to experience, this. We want to make sure it's a range of cultures. Not one book is the representation for an entire demographic, an entire group of people. All collections, if we were to create, our ideal collection, we want, of course, representation from cultures, languages, and ethnicities within your community, if it's possible. I know it's hard getting those languages firsthand. Immigrant and refugee experiences, a wide range of cultures, and then also, again, a wide range within a culture. Books that are about or show children or show bicultural experiences, and then the diversity within ethnic and racial groups. The collection should also represent books that have various lifestyles, single parent families, grand families, foster families, LGBTQIA+ families, adoptive families, and the wide range of family structures. There's not one size fits all for families, and I'm sure I omitted various lifestyles here. But one thing I love about the variety of books that are being published now is there is a child, being raised by a grandparent. There's a child, you see a one parent, you see multiple parents, you see a whole family bringing up children, but having those different lifestyles and family structures represented. Books that show male and female characters and positive roles that break gender stereotypes. It could be a stay-at-home dad instead of the stay-at-home mom, and on and on. Books that portray children who are disabled positively and as abled main characters, not always as the sidekick, not always as someone in the background. Oh, we're going to paint a child with a prosthetic or in a wheelchair just to cover our bases. We want to make sure that those children are front and center in the story, that they're portrayed as capable characters. And then also able and differently abled children from all racial and ethnic groups, from all genders and classes, are active participants in your stories. And the books and the pictures that are represented here are just among some of my favorites. They're personal choices, and I'm sure you have other ones to add. We'll have a chance to share those as well. Okay. So what additional things should you think about when choosing books? I gave a very quick Cliff's Notes version of things you should think about when selecting books, and they were broad categories, but feel free to put in the chat or raise your hand of additional things that you think about when you're selecting books for the families that you serve. Open up the chat. Okay, thank you. So in the chat, let's see who's saying that. Legentry is saying, something I've learned doing this work is to eliminate titles that feature animals. Even if the moral of the story speaks to diversity or inclusiveness, they need to see themselves. Great. Age group and child developmental level, absolutely, Joyce. Sometimes we try to fit a square peg in a round hole because it has the content we want, but it's not necessarily age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. What the children are interested in. Will Marie, I'm glad you were happy to see Thunder Rose. That's one of my all-time favorites too. Great. Developmentally appropriate. Anything else? A child's interests. Looks for different difficult situations children may experience. Absolutely. Thanks, Kyler. Thanks, Wilmarie. Thanks, Elizabeth, Joyce, Legentry. Okay. Tactile and sensory experiences. Absolutely, Roberta. We have a lot of kiddos. Every kiddo needs some sensory experiences, and sometimes having that tactile really helps them. Teachable moments. Absolutely, Iris. Thank you. A lot of different teachable moments. Okay. If you think of something that you want to make sure you also include when you select books and select those titles, feel free to continue to put it in the chat. We have a little bit more to go here. Okay. So we know what to choose, and now we're going to talk a little bit about some criteria for evaluating children's books and bias. Again, this is my personal collection of what I look at when evaluating children's books for bias and what I make sure I don't have, and some tools that I use. So first thing I do is look at the context. I look at the background of the author and the illustrator. So it doesn't mean I won't select a book that is not written by an author and illustrator with own voices, but that is one of the first things that I look at. So is this, let's take Thunder Rose, that was just in the chat. You know, who wrote and illustrated Thunder Rose? Do they have any experiences that are similar to the protagonist's gender, their identity, their racial and ethnic group, the story content? So I do look at that first. That doesn't mean I eliminate that, but that is one of the first things I look at. I also look at the copyright date. Books have been around for, generations. Sometimes when the book is a little older, that might mean that I look at it a little bit deeper, just because thankfully we're not where we need to be as a society, but our views in general have evolved, and again, not as quickly as they need to, but we're taking a look at, if a book was published in the 60s, I'm probably going to look at it a little bit more closely, and I'm going to do some research about it. So that's just my personal, I look at the copyright date. Omission and representation. Omission is a form of bias. So I really want to make sure I'm having as inclusive a collection as possible. I look for tokenism. I look for, 10 Little Indians. I look at that, like, am I tokenizing a specific culture, a specific gender, a specific group of people? And I also look for positive, affirming representation. Not every character in every book, like we just talked about the teachable moments, there are going to be characters in a book that are not viewed in a positive light, but is that part of the lesson? Is that part of the content? Or is that looking at that particular group of people and making a blanket statement about them? I also look at the illustrations. I look at the images. Are they offensive? Are my images including, gross representations of a specific person? Sometimes the gross representation is across the board, and you have characters with gigantic heads and small bodies, and that's not necessarily meant to be offensive. But I look at characters in comparison to each other. Are one group of characters, do they, is the image representative? Is it accurate? Do the illustrations match the story? Believe it or not, sometimes they don't. So I'm looking, all of these things at first is what I'm looking for in these different categories. I'm also checking the storyline. What's the message? And making sure I have, again, various, of wide variety within different cultures and with different groups. I want to make sure that, let's say my books in English and Spanish, we have hundreds of them at Raising a Reader. I want to make sure that those bilingual books, we have to have books about immigration, about struggles, about acclimating to communities and those experiences. But I also need to have bilingual books about children going about their day and having quote unquote normal childhood experiences, building a garden in the community or having a best friend. I need to make sure that, again, that range is there, and then it's not all about one particular topic for a specific age group, specific group of people. Are diverse characters shown in positive leadership roles? Again, I don't need always to have the child who is the minority or differently abled as the sidekick or as part of a group just to check off a box. I want to make sure that they're in leadership roles. And is the message affirming to children from diverse backgrounds? I might check for inaccuracy and inappropriateness in the depiction of culture or lifestyle. I often go, if I have a book that is a cultural or historical reference, I will do some research about it. One example might be if I'm looking for books about tribal communities and about Native Americans, my go-to is looking at the work of Debbie Reese and going through and looking through her records, different internet sites, and to see how she's evaluating that particular book. And I've omitted several books just because of, that research that I've done. Look at the language. Are there problematic words, negative or offensive words to describe people? And then are language and dialects used respectfully? Oftentimes, you might find that they're not used as respectfully as you think they are. Or again, looking at that copyright date, what might once have been just overlooked before and even done in the best of intentions before, now we know is just not acceptable. I'm going to stop here and look at the chat. Yes. Mickey, you raise a good point. Mickey says, I think we need to clarify the difference between building a culturally diverse book collection and the issue of banning books, which this should not lead to. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and I only laugh because we are talking about Raising a Reader just coming out with a statement about banned books, and as I look at banned books, I'm seeing more and more titles that are banned just because they could it could lead to certain discussions. And absolutely, thinking about looking at the banned books, I'm not necessarily prepared to have a large discussion about that today, but just being aware of those banned books and working with your agency, to make sure, why is it banned? What is the reason? Is it a banned book because of tokenism, because it has an inaccurate depiction, or is it a banned book because it's a hush-hush subject that we want to pretend doesn't exist? There's a big difference between that. Janelle says book vendors are making it easier by creating multicultural book collections. And is it Daisy or Desi says, I'm Mexican American. I've always wanted to write children's books about my daughter's experiences. Absolutely. And Terry says, facilities may feel pressured to think about the political or perceived political or religious views of families and staff when choosing books. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Great. This is a lot of words, and I promise I'm not going to read all of these, but some of these are really important. When you have a strong, independent woman, are they manlike? Are they just, have over masculine qualities? Non-athletic men are effeminate. People with disabilities are not independent. All people in the AAPI community are good at martial arts, are really good at learning and academics. Also, again, AAPI moms are strict and overbearing. LGBTQIA plus people are invisible or sexual predators. American Indians, Native Americans, and tribal communities are all living in teepees, carrying arrows, and or half naked in the winter. Poor people are invisible or depicted as passive, needing help from others. And I'll read one more. Latino men talk funny, are lazy, they're gang members, or wear oversized sombreros. Again, we have to be aware of these stereotypes. They do exist. And we need to make sure that our children's books don't have these types of stereotypes. Also be aware of concept books that use cultural or ethnicity as an object to be counted. So this book that I kind of did the big red circle was 10 Little Indians, 5 Chinese brothers, characters playing dress up as others, or a portrayal of cultures as costumes. Characters wearing traditional dress instead of contemporary dress unless it's appropriate. So I love the book Suki's Kimono, and it is totally appropriate for her in that particular story to wear a kimono because she's celebrating her heritage. She's not just going to school in traditional dress just to do it because she is the Asian character. So some of these things in evaluating books are really important as well. Also make sure, again, this is just a summary. I'm sure we can dig down deep in every culture, but Asian cultures as interchangeable. That is often in the case of Chinese and Korean, Taiwanese. They're not all interchangeable. There are very unique, specific groups. Asian Americans as model minorities, African American women in roles of servitude, men of color in negative roles, and females as passive or weak. Again, just some things, additional things to be aware of. Also, omission as a form of bias. If we don't have books that talk about homelessness and families experiencing homelessness, families who might have an incarcerated parent, transgender adults and families, families with 2 dads or 2 moms, single parents, blue collar workers, rural communities, musicians, artists, or writers. We want to make sure that we have as many titles as possible with as many different family structures and situations. Okay. So let's talk about it. What other evaluation criteria? That was a long list. What other evaluation criteria should be added? Robin, thank you, from Yadkin County, says being aware of books that say all people. Absolutely. Definitely. Oh, okay. So some of the comments Jessica has, find bilingual books for parents to be able to read to children. Absolutely. Diversity in sports. Books that capture children's attention. Cultures represents in job representation in sports. Great. Okay. Anything else? Any other evaluation criteria that should be considered? Okay. I think we mentioned inclusivity of languages, especially the languages of the families you serve. Okay, great. It's a lot of great information. So some evaluation resources. Raising Reader, we have our own evaluation criteria and a log of how we make sure that we are having as many different books as possible. But we started with this classroom library questionnaire from our partners at Lee & Low Books. Lee & Low is the largest multicultural children's publisher in the country. They are also multiculturally owned and operated. So I took a look and I used this to kind of set us up for our own evaluating at Raising a Reader. So this is available online. You can just look up Lee & Low Books Classroom Library Questionnaire. And this really helps you. It's not to go through every book, but if you're familiar enough with the collection of books that you have for your families, your children, your classroom libraries, you can answer the questions. And where you have, you know, the first one, my library contains main characters of color. I can strongly agree with that. I can strongly disagree with that. And this allows you to go back, gosh, if I strongly disagree that my library contains titles that have main characters with disabilities, that might help me identify some of those titles so that I know where the gaps are in my collection. So once you do an evaluation, or once you're able to take a look, or it could be using a tool like Lee and Low has, it could be using your own tool. I just wanted to open this up to finding more titles that are culturally responsive. And again, this isn't the most comprehensive list. This is just for this particular presentation. And if you have others, please add them to the chat. So I use, first of all, I go to the American Library Association, and there are several different awards, like the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, the Jane Addams Children's Book Award, Ezra Jack Keats, the Rainbow Project Reading List. So I might go to some of these books and look there. The American Library Association has a comprehensive resources for titles. I also look at some of these lists. Disability in Kids Lit, the Brown Bookshelf, We Need Diverse Books, Social Justice Books is also, I mean, I can say, I will keep saying they're my favorite. It's like a kid with 50 best friends. These are all my favorites. Diversity in Young Adults, Spanish Playground, American Indians and Children's Literature. So there are a lot of different resources where I go. Sometimes I go to find books here. Other times, if I find a book myself, I verify it, and I might go to We Need Diverse Books and Social Justice Books as kind of my first go round, and then I dig a little bit deeper into some of these other resources. I mentioned social justice books, but I also go to, ALA's The Rainbow List, or Diverse Book Finder, 1,000 Black Girl Books Resource Guide, Small Presses by POC and Native Nations. So again, these are just some of the places that I tend to go to find titles. Okay, so I'm looking at the time. I realize we've got about 10 minutes left. So any books that you must have, I know someone really likes Thunder Rose. Here are a few of my newer favorite ones, or additional resources that you might go to. Again, you can raise your hand. We were going to do a small group, but we don't necessarily have time for that this morning. This discussion's been so great. So feel free to put it in the chat, either your must-have books that you want to make sure everyone knows about, or a resource you go to finding diverse and inclusive titles. Right, Ashley, awesome. Yep, social justice books. That was definitely one of my number ones. Thanks, Ashley, for that. Again, you can raise your hand using the, there is a reactions icon on your toolbar under more. Ashley also put the link for social justice books. I really like using that link. Any others? Let's lift up some of your favorites in the chat. Okay. While you're doing that, I'm going to keep going, but we'll come back to the chat. So some of your favorites, again, these are just a couple of my favorites. There's only 4. Couldn't put it all. Dream Drum Girl, Lola and Leo books, Island Born. I love that. Thanks, Will Marie. Those are all books in my collection right now too. That's great. Okay, so as a case study, I'm going to show you some of the books that Raising a Reader uses. Raising a Reader was created based on a literacy crisis that back in 1999, and then and now we're still leaving 60% of our children behind by grade 4. Our goal is to help families develop, practice, and maintain literacy habits that are essential for school and life success. Won't go over all of the numbers, but we work with about 3,000 affiliate agencies across 3,000 different communities across the United States. with various affiliate agencies. Many of you are Raising a Reader affiliates on this webinar right now. And how it works. Number one is really what we talked about in family engagement. Families are receiving best practice research-based strategies. So number one, you are your child's first and most important teacher. Number two, let's overcome some of the barriers to sharing books by having inclusive books in multiple languages, including wordless books that you can access for your child. And number three, here are research-based reading strategies for your families. Number two, our children bring home a red book bag every week that's filled with award-winning books so they can practice the habit of sharing books. Again, it's those windows and mirrors. And when kiddos are excited because they see themselves, whether it's their hair, like someone mentioned earlier today, or their family structure or something like them, they go home and they beg, Mom, Dad, Abuela, Tia, sister, brother, read to me, read to me. We have to read these books. So children get a red book bag every week and they get to go home and share those books with the families. But the families have had that family engagement component that we use through a train the trainer model. So families actually feel, gosh, okay, I get these books at home and I feel good about reading or sharing the book with my child. We really talk about, it's not reading the book to your child, it's sharing it. So some families that might look like talking about the pictures. Some families that might look like, coming up with a story based on the pictures, and other families it might look like actual reading. And some families it's a conversation about the book content. It looks different in every family based on the needs and the experiences of those families. So we're creating this habit, and those habits are really what it takes to help children become ready for reading when they enter school and skilled reading by age 8. We also have a connection with the library because we truly believe, as we talked about in family engagement, that the community resources are also help what support our families. And when you have a connection to the library, you're able to sustain those habits that you created with Raising a Reader. So we work on a train the trainer model. Again, I don't know about what's going on in, Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina, but the agency does. So we work on a train the trainer model where we're able to train the agency. The agency takes what's going to work for their families and they connect with their own families so that book sharing becomes this treasured family time and a habit that builds literacy skills for later in life. I'm not going to go through our evaluation information, but you can always contact me afterwards because I went a little bit long. And what makes us different? Many agencies choose, they say, what's your literacy initiative? And they choose one and they check the box and they're like, all right, our literacy is done. So we want to make sure that what makes us different. And we work collectively with other agencies such as, I know there's Imagination Library, there's First Book, Reading is Fundamental. There's all of these wonderful organizations and every one of us is doing something different. And you can't necessarily have one and say, okay, well, gosh, we're doing, book distribution. So that means our literacy initiative is over. We want to make sure we have a mechanism for family engagement, a mechanism for book distribution, a mechanism for home visiting and those intensive services. So Raising a Reader is among the spectrum of agencies that can collectively work together, as we've seen in hundreds of communities across the country, to help families not only have access to books and build their home libraries, but also have that motivation that those routines and accessibility to books as well. I can't wait to show you some of the books that are in our collection. Again, we've got over 3,000, but I picked some of my favorites. We have 3,000 titles in 15 different languages, organized developmentally, some of the things that we said were must-haves in this presentation. So our commitments are having books that include titles representative of all children, providing the windows and mirrors, and removing barriers to families for families to share books. So again, 4 of many, many different books in our 0 to 2 collection. Again, we want some of those active representations with language, with real illustrations of kiddos. Ages 3 to 4, these are just a couple of our books in the collection. Another is one of my favorites by Christian Robinson right now. And our pre-K, you saw a couple of these books through the presentation. Someone mentioned their child was Latinx and African American. I encourage you to look at Hermanito by Dr. Khalid White. I think you will love it. He's a local Bay Area author. Kindergarten, these are a few of the books in kindergarten. I don't know which one is my favorite. The Proudest Blue, Drawn Together, and Soulway are kind of, might be my top 3 in this group, although they're all beautiful books, and our school age collection. So you can see I just kind of did a random representation of each of the collections in the Raising a Reader collection. We talked about a lot today about the importance of family engagement and cultural responsivity, about how to evaluate and find books. But we know ultimately when families are involved, children will achieve. And some of the best ways to involve families are to be as responsive as possible. So I'm going to go back to the chat. Germy lesson on germs. Thank you, Jalandra. Daphne also said, our family reads We Are Grateful. That's part of our collection. And my son also loves Our Skin. I like that one too. I read that with my 6-year-old recently. And then Sharon asked, do families keep the books? So with the Raising Reader Classic Book Bag rotation, families do not keep the books. It is a lending library type of rotation, but Raising Reader also has 2 other program models that help build home libraries. So families do get to keep the books. Okay, oh gosh, I'm 1 minute ahead time. And I just want to say to everyone, thank you so much for attending today. It was a lot to talk about. I hope you were able to get some real tangible resources, even if it's just a website or an evaluation criteria for helping your family engagement efforts in your home, in your collections, your library collections. So as Jessica mentioned, there is an evaluation, or you can feel free to send me a chat or a message. I'm going to put my email right here, Armstrong@raisingareader.org, if you have something specific that you want to make sure I know about, or if you have any anything else that I should add to this. So Jessica just mentioned the link for the Smart Start, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of this virtual conference, and I hope I can see you all in person next year. Ashley put in the survey, so thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Rebecca. I appreciate your, I have so many books, so I'm going to go back and look at the presentation and just share with everyone I know who has a young child. So that's very exciting. I wanted to announce that our next session is at 11:45 today. It will be a 30-minute session sponsored by Kaplan Early Learning, but it will be between now and then, liminal space, language loss post-pandemic. So that is one of our sessions sponsored by Kaplan Early Learning. In addition, I wanted to announce that we have a raffle prize to provide you at, in this session. The raffle winner for this session is Lauren Ventura. So Lauren, you are the raffle winner of the giant sensory mirror balls. These are provided by Lakeshore Early Learning. And so we will email you to get your contact information so that these can be mailed out to you. So congratulations. Additionally, we would love your feedback on this session as well as other conference sessions. Ashley just posted the surveys in our chat. There is a survey for yesterday, so please fill out yesterday's if you have not yet. And there is a survey for today. So at the end of today, please consider giving feedback for this session as well as others. We send this feedback to our speakers and use this feedback to determine our content in the future. So thank you all so much. Again, our next session is at 11:45. So thank you all so much, and thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.